These videos were created for you to watch along. They'll teach you about ClientTrack so you know what's going on. So best of luck with all of your data. Now here's your HMIS system administrator. Hello and welcome to the Path Annual Report training video. In this video I'll be going over how the Path Report works in ClientTrack. We'll look at the different fields that it populates on the report and where those come from in the system. Now while this video focuses on the annual Path submission, I also have a separate video that covers the monthly Path Report submission that all Georgia Path providers have to do. That video is meant to build upon this one though, so you would want to watch this video first to get a full understanding of the Path Report in ClientTrack. I also have another Path training video that focuses on data collection, so if you are a Path provider, I definitely recommend you watching that as well to make sure you are collecting Path data properly in the system. All that being said, let's go ahead and get into the Path Report. So you'll want to be on the home workspace, and once you are there you will see the Georgia HMIS Reports menu group. Within that you've got the HUD HMIS Reports menu group and then the 2018 Path Annual Report. So we'll go ahead and click on that. And this takes us to our Path Report settings. Here we'll want to go ahead and set our date range. So this report for the annual submission is always going to be submitted in December, but the date range is going to start with July 1st. So we'll go ahead and key that in here, and then it's always going to end on June 30th. You'll want to make sure the organization that you're wanting to run this for is selected. So if you do have access to multiple organizations, just make sure that one is selected. Then here you'll want to go in and select your Path projects. Now you should always have two Path projects, a services only one and one that's set up as street outreach. We know that the street outreach one is where you would enroll someone where at the initial time that you first contact them, they are on the streets, they are homeless on the streets, versus services only would be something, for instance, if they were in an emergency shelter at the time you first meet them. And that's going to determine what project they go into. But when you go to run your Path report, you want to make sure that you have access to both of these. So if you go to run this report and you only see one Path project, then there is a problem in your setup and you'll want to submit a issue ticket so your COC admin can work with you in getting that fixed. So we'll go ahead and make sure both of those are selected. Now there is a COC filter down here, but because when you're submitting a Path report, you would want to not filter by COC. You'd want to see all of the enrollments that your projects have done. So you would not want to normally use this filter. However, if you do have a Path project that serves multiple COCs, and for whatever reason you're just curious to see what the data looks like from one COC to another, you could go in and run this with a filter. But again, for submission purposes, you would want to leave that blank. Another thing that'll save you a lot of time, and this is pretty much the case on most reports in ClientTrack, is you'll notice a saved report settings option up top here. If you go up to it and click Save Settings, it will allow you to type a name here, and what this is going to do is save these settings. So next time you go to run the Path report, instead of having to fill out all this information, you'll be able to just use the drop down here and you'll have this option Path to 2018, and it will automatically populate all of this information. So that's just something that'll save you a lot of time in the future. Here at the bottom we have several options. So this first one, Report, is going to give you a visual report of your Path report. And so this is great for just an overview of looking at your numbers. It also allows you to look at the specific clients that are populating on the path report as well. And so it's a good, useful tool for those kind of purposes. You also have schedule report. This will allow you to schedule this visual report on a regular basis. So if you wanted to just have maybe a reminder that this report needs to be ran every month, you could go in and set that. What this will do is it will shoot you an email when this report runs on this ongoing basis, and then you'd be able to actually find that by going to My Client Track, My Saved Reports, and then you will have that in a PDF right here where you can go in and download it. We'll go back to our path report though here. And like I mentioned, because I saved those settings, I can just click there, and now I've got everything filled out here. I don't have to go in and do that manually again. So the other button we've got here is Run Export. Now what this will do is this will generate a set of CSV files. This is what the option you'll want to do if you're actually submitting the path report. So again, this is great for overview, looking at your data, looking at some data quality issues maybe within the data. This is what you want to do when you are actually running the report to submit it, because it's going to generate some CSV files, and that's what you're going to upload. And we'll get into this a little bit later in the training video, what that process looks like. So now I'll go ahead and click on just the standard report button so we can see what this report looks like within the system. So here's our path report here. We've got some buttons up here that lets us navigate this report. If I click here, I can go to the second page of the report. This option here will allow me to save this report in different formats. So a common thing here might be, maybe I want to save a PDF of this report just to look at later offline, or maybe I want to print it later. I can click PDF and save that. Refresh repopulates this report in all of these numbers that it's pulled, and so maybe I've just gone in and made a change to this report after I ran it initially. Well, instead of having to go rerun the report, I can just click refresh, and it's going to repopulate all the numbers there. This would allow me to print the report off if I wanted to. And then we have our standard minimize and maximize buttons here. This is on most of the reports within Client Track, and what this will allow you to do is just that, minimize the report. So if I click that, the report goes away, and it's actually under this little hidden option right here. So what I could do with that is maybe I realized I needed to go enroll another person in Path that I forgot. I could go do that. Then I could click back on hidden here, which will pull up the report. And then like I mentioned with that refresh option, I could go refresh it, and then instantly that report is going to be updated. So that can be a really useful tool to use as you're kind of troubleshooting data issues or fixing data quality problems. So now let's go ahead and get into the actual report itself. Look at the different things that are listed here. So we have our date range that we use for the report. We have what organizations we selected and the different projects that were selected. These options here are what we call drill downs. So if I click on this, it will actually pull the data that's kind of the specific data that's behind these fields. So if I click on that, I'm actually seeing the client names, the different enrollments. This is really helpful to see what data is actually populating on these reports. Instead of just getting these numbers here, you can actually see what's kind of behind them. So you can drill down on this one and also this one on the path report. And next we'll go ahead and just start walking through these individual questions and kind of how they populate in the system and how that works. So questions 8 through 11 are based on anyone that has an enrollment into either of these two projects, and they have what's called a contact service recorded in the system within this date range. So we're going to look into detail exactly what that entails. So I'm going to drill down so I can look at the data behind here. And actually, I think I can, let me see if I can lay this out so we can look at both of these at the same time. There we go. So in this first question here, we have number of persons contacted by PATH funded staff this reporting period, and it's listed as 4. And we have 4 people on our report here. So these are going to be those 4 people. So let's go ahead and pull up one of those. So we'll go with Dan Smith. I'm just going to minimize these. And here we have Dan Smith. He has an enrollment on 4/3/18. So that is going to be an active enrollment within our date range. And then he has what we can see here, a contact service, at least one contact service within the report range. This is really important, and if they do not have any contact services, they will not populate on the PATH report period. Now, the way this particular PATH service is, contact service is created is when you do an enrollment, for instance, the last step of it, it records a contact service. And so that's really important. If you are just starting the enrollment, the intake process for a PATH client and you don't go all the way through it, then you're not going to get to this final step here that records that initial contact service. And if you don't do that, then they're not going to show up on the PATH report. We get a lot of issue tickets and questions on why, when I'm running my PATH report, am I not seeing any numbers? And a lot of time, or why are my numbers very low? And a lot of the times it's because they don't have that contact service recorded. Now I use the term contact service, and for that particular form, it records a service that is just called that contact. But also any of the PATH services in the system, and these are going to be the services that start with PATH, as we can see listed here. All of these are coded in the back end as counting as a contact service. And so that's kind of important to realize, and I kind of talk about that a little bit more in the data collection PATH training video, is that if you're recording any of these services, they are counting just the same as a contact service. We just have this particular service to just represent it is just a contact. So this would be, especially when you first meet the person, you might not be providing a particular service outside of this, but you can record it as just a contact. So let's go ahead and pull back our reports here so we can get back into looking at this. So we've got the four count here, and we can see all these listed here. And so that's going to mean they all have an enrollment in one of these projects. And again, they have some kind of a service within our 2 date ranges here. Next, we have number of new persons contact this reporting period in a PATH street outreach project. So it's going to say kind of out of these 4 people, which ones were new and which ones just were within the street outreach project. So here we can see there's only 1 person listed under street outreach. And so this Dan Smith here is going to be our 1 person. And then next we have number of new persons contact this reporting period in a PATH services only project. So we can see we've got 3 different people that were enrolled in PATH services only. But again, this is just looking at new persons, and we can see that this one here, their PATH enrollment, their project entry date is 1/1/17, which is before our starting date range here. So they're not counted as new. And so that takes us to 2, which would be these 2 people right here. We can see they started within the 2 date ranges here. And then question 11 just totals that up, so that's going to be 3 total. Next we have instances of contact from first contact until the date of enrollment for all active clients who became enrolled this reporting period. So kind of a concept that's really important when it comes to PATH is that while we talk about enrolling people in ClientTrack into one of these projects. There's also what a course is considered enrolling into PATH, yes or no, their PATH status. And that is recorded on the project enrollment screen. We can see that listed here with these questions here. Client became enrolled in PATH. And so there's a difference in just enrolling someone into one of these projects and then actually saying that that you determined they're eligible for PATH and putting a yes here. And that causes some confusion because, when you first meet somebody at your very initial contact, you are doing an enrollment for them into one of your two PATH projects. And then it might be later on, though, if you determine they're actually eligible to be enrolled in PATH, and that's where they get this status. So that's an important concept to keep in mind when you're starting to look at questions like questions 12, because it is just looking for people that have a PATH enrollment status of yes. And what it's looking at is how many services they've had from the first contact until their date of enrollment. So and we've got a 5 here, to find out who is counting here, where these contacts are coming from, because we'll notice it's not here on just our standard drill down. What you'll want to do is actually export this into Excel. So we'll want to select the Excel data option here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that and open that up. And here we have a little bit more detailed information on the different enrollments here. And so if we scroll over, it's going to be all the way over to the right, we can get to column AU, which is number of contacts. And we can see there's one person here that's had contacts in between their, like it said on the report, their first contact to the date of their PATH enrollment. And that is showing 5 here. And that is going to be our Dan Smith client. So let's go back in to client track here, and let's look at Dan Smith. And we can see, sure enough, his project start date is 4/3/18. If we go back and look at his PATH enrollment date, when his PATH status was determined, that was 4/10/18. So we're looking at how many contact services did he get, or any services, because all of our services count as contact services. How many PATH services did he get between 4/3/18 and 4/10/18? And then we can see those listed here, and it's 5. So that's where that populates from. And so this number can be very high because, again, it's not deduplicating based on how many clients. It's just looking at how many individual contacts did they have between these dates. So this can be a really high number, a lot higher than the actual number of people you've served. For 13 and 14, this is based on, they have a client track enrollment, they have the contact service within the date range, and they have a PATH determination status. So this first one here is looking at people that could not be enrolled in PATH, so they have a no for their PATH enrollment status. And then this next one is people that it was determined they could be enrolled in PATH, and so they have a yes. And so we can see that reflected here. We have 2 people actually with yeses, but this is oh yeah, I don't think I mentioned that. This is just looking at new person, so we're looking at people that had a new enrollment within our reporting range here. And so while we've got 2 people that have yeses for PATH enrollment status, this one was determined before our reporting range, but this one here was within it. So that's why we have 1 person counting for this question here, who became enrolled in PATH. And then for the one could not be enrolled, we just have the one no. We can see that that's within the reporting range as well. And so that's kind of where those populate from. And then we have question 15, number with active enrolled PATH status at any point during the date range. So again, when it's talking about active, they need to have some kind of a PATH service within our reporting range here, but their PATH status could be at any date range. It doesn't matter on that one. So for instance, this says 2, and we see that yes, there are 2 people enrolled in PATH. This is the one that did not count for question 14 because it was an older date that was determined, but for this question here, it's going to be at any point. And then here we have 16, number of active enrolled PATH clients receiving community mental health services through any funding source at any point during the reporting period. So like all of these, they still have to have that contact service within the date range. But this one also has a second criteria. They have to receive community mental health services. Now to find that, we can go back to our export here. And then we can scroll over. And if we look at AR here, we'll see mental health services. And we've got this one person here that has received that. So let's go ahead and just pull up that client so we can kind of see what that looks like in the system. So here's our person here. They've got the, of course, PATH enrollment. And then here we can see they have received a community mental health service. And this does not have to be within the date range. So this is a 4117 service that they got. But again, on our report, it says it doesn't matter when they got this service. It can be at any point. So that is how that works. Next, we get into services provided. So this is going to just be applicable for people that are enrolled in one of these projects and have a PATH status of yes. So they're considered enrolled actually in PATH. That was determined that they were eligible. So out of those people, it's going to look at a breakdown of how many people received at least one of these services. Now this is deduplicated, so if a client receives 20 case management services, that one client would just count as one on this report. And this is a drill down as well, so I can click here and it's going to then give me a breakdown of the different clients that are represented here. If I wanted to go see specifically what services, I would want to go in and do an Excel data export of this. So I'm going to get rid of this other export for now that I had open. And then we'll do a Excel data export of this. And here we have it listed here. So I'm going to go ahead and expand these so we can look at this. We can see there's one person that got a residential supportive services, and that service date is within the reporting period, so we can see that represented here on our report. Residential supportive services is 1. Now we also saw some other services listed here, or other options here under the service column. These are referrals here though, so they're not going to count as traditional services. And so for services, we just have the one here. And so this client here is going to be what is making up this field right here. So that takes us to page 2 of the path report. And here we get into the referrals provided. So we can see that we have one listed under substance use treatment and one with employee assistance. We can get that information on that same services drill down and Excel data export. So we can see there's 2 listings here for employment assistance, but it's from the same client, so that is just going to count as one. And then there's our substance use treatment as well. So that's where we see the 2 different fields here populating. And then it also looks at number who attained the service from the referral. And if we look at our Excel sheet here, we can see only one of these is listed as they attained this referral. So let's go in and look at that, because that's an important step, and that's something that seems to sometimes be forgotten. People forget to go in and record if a client obtained a referral or not. So we'll kind of go in and look at what that looks like. So we can look at referrals here. So there is where the referral was recorded. But if you need to ever go in and add the status that they obtained that service, you can go in and edit the referral. And at the very bottom here, you have this result option, and service provided needs to be checked. If any of these are selected, it's not going to count as they obtained this referral service. So service provided is what you'd want to put there. Let's go ahead and pull up our reports again. So that's going to cover all of 18. And then here, questions 19 through 27, this walks you or pulls a lot of data from project entry. So a lot of the assessments you do, like financial assessments. Here it's looking at, for people that exited, it's looking at their information on exit. And then this one at report end date for clients who were still active in PATH as of report end date. So these are going to be people that stayed, but maybe the information changed. Maybe you did a during program enrollment assessment on them after they were already enrolled in the program and their information changed. And this is basically what's the latest information on all our people that are still enrolled and not exited. So this covers a lot of things here. Everything from like our income assessments to basic demographics, veteran status, things like SOAR connection, living situation that was recorded on their intake, and if they were chronically homeless or not. All of this information can be found on the drill down for the services, actually not the services provided. It's the drill down on the first drill down of the client track path report. So if there it is. So if I go back and do that person served, and then I go and do the Excel data export, and go back to that screen with all the information, this is where you're going to be able to find all that information. So you'll be able to find the race, ethnicity, veteran status, SOAR connection, income information, if they were chronically homeless at entry, that's recorded right here, and all that kind of stuff. So this first drill down is really important when you export into Excel, because it's going to have all of that information on it. So that covers all of the different options that we have within the path report. And again, this was the visual representation of the path report in the system. Next, we wanted to cover what that export process looked like. So we talked about the differences between using this to just be looking at your data, and then when you're actually ready to export it, you'll want to click on the Run Export. So let's go ahead and click on that. And we're going to get some different options here. So normally by default, anytime you are doing an export, because it is going to be queuing up CSV files for you to download, by default it checks the encrypt export option. And what that would do is it would make you create a password. This would be not necessarily your client track password, but just a specific password you want for this export. So when you download it later on, and it's sitting on your computer, on your desktop, on your hard drive, that you would have to use a password to actually open it up. And that would be important for exports where there is actual client data on it. So if you've got an export that's got social security numbers, birth dates, names, that kind of thing, that might be important. For the path report export though, it does not generate any personal identifiable information on the export. So to make things a lot easier for you and less kind of hoops to jump through, we recommend going ahead and deselecting the encrypt export. You can leave the other options alone here, and then you will have to select, I assume, the full responsibility of ensuring the security of the exported files and any data contained within. But again, all we're looking at is aggregate data that's going to be generated on those exported CSV files. So I'm going to go ahead and click I assume that, and then click done. It's going to give you a little pop-up box here just to let you know your export has been queued and will be processed at the next available time. So something important to realize about exports is it's a little bit different than just going and running a report like we did previously by clicking the report button. What it does is it queues it up, and we have a server that just handles all of our exports. And if a lot of people are doing exports at the same time as you are, then those all come, first serve. And so you might queue up this export and it might take you 30 minutes before you get it back. It might be a couple hours if a ton of people are running one. And so again, it's just a little bit different process than running a traditional report in the system. So I'm going to click OK on this, and then it's going to take me to the Files on Server page. This is where you would see any reports that you have exported before. And so we can see these are some that I did the other day. You can get to this page by clicking on Files on Server, which is found under your Georgia HMS report. So this is how you always get back to this option here. And then if you click to view the status of exports, you can actually see your status of the one that we just queued up. So this one right here is the path report that we just queued up, and we can see that it has not started yet. So this is where I could come back though in a little bit and check the status of it. What should happen eventually is you'll get to where it's completed successfully. And of course, once it's completed successfully, then you would find it in your standard Files on Server option here. If you ever ran it and you get any kind of an error message here, that would be something you'd want to submit a ticket on, which is not very common at all that we see that. But again, if you do ever see any kind of error message here, you'd want to go ahead and submit a ticket on it. But once we have completed successfully, we would find it here. And this is what it would look like. This button here would allow us to download that file. And as long as we did not keep the encrypt export option enabled, then we're just going to get a traditional zip file here. And this is going to contain all the CSV files that you need to do your annual export. So it'd be just as simple as downloading it. Once you've downloaded it, that's the file you'll upload. We can see here, this one is an exe file. This is one that is encrypted. And so if you did use the option of encrypted, this is going to be an executable file. You would have to download it. You would have to double click on the file once it's downloaded, type in your passcode, whatever password you used, then it will extract all the files, and then you will have to zip them yourself manually and then upload it. So we can see there's a little bit more, there's more steps to that process. So that's one reason we recommend, again, at least just for the path export, because it doesn't contain sensitive information in it, just doing the non-encrypted version of it. And then you've got your nice little zip file right there. So that concludes this training video. Again, for the monthly path report process that you have to go through, there's a separate video for that, and it kind of goes along with this video though. Thank you.